and welcome to Haemcast. I'm Kathryn Jenner. In this episode, we're continuing our special family focus series with local families with bleeding disorders. When it comes to managing family life with a child who has a bleeding disorder, parents aren't just caregivers, they're organisers, advocates and educators. Alongside managing their child's condition, they have to help them understand it too. So, how do you go about talking to your child about their bleeding disorder? How do you explain where it comes from, what it means for their day-to-day lives, and why treatment is important? I spoke with local families members Hannah, Mark and Jackie about their experiences. Here's Hannah.
Jake has severe haemophilia type A, so there was no history in the family of any bleeding disorders. So when he was about 6 months old onwards, I guess when he got a bit mobile, he just started to be covered in head to toe in bruises that didn't really heal. Looked awful, were everywhere, could just be bruises from kind of us just picking him up, so like handprint bruises. So went to the doctors quite a few times and then eventually, after being really assertive, got referred to a paediatrician who did the relevant blood tests, and that's when we found out. So we found out when he was about 8 months old, I think. And then they subsequently tested me and found that I had the same genetic mutation that he did.
So that must have been quite a surprise for you.
I think, yeah, it was a huge shock. And I think the biggest part was not knowing what it was, knowing there was something wrong with my child, people not listening, people going down the other route of thinking that we were harming him. And then the first thing they said was I thought it was leukemia. So it was a long process, quite a scary process to get the diagnosis. Yeah, huge shock, definitely.
When you did find out, when you got that diagnosis and obviously got your own diagnosis as well, how was it all explained to you? How did you find out more about it?
Well, initially it was just the GP thought I'd received a letter, which I hadn't. So they just phoned up and kind of told me over the phone and told me lots about date information. It was extremely scary. And then we were quickly referred to our local treatment centre. And I think had an appointment within about 2 weeks. I mean, I did Google everything about it and scared myself to death. As I'm sure lots of people do. And then we finally sat down in a room with some experts who were brilliant and gave us lots of information, some support groups. I still probably did quite a lot of Googling as well. Spoke to some people at some charities that were haemophilia charities. But yeah, most of the relevant information was definitely from the treatment centre.
How old was your son when he first started to understand that he maybe was a bit different somehow?
So we kind of always sort of drip fed him information, and he knew that obviously that he was having medication, he had a portacaf and regular treatment. So he knew he had haemophilia, but I don't think he worked out he was actually different to other people, probably until about year 1 of school. So kind of like 5, 6. And that's when it really hit home to him that, you know, not every child was having this stuff done to them. And he really kind of realised how big a difference it was, I think. I remember talking about sticky blood quite a lot of the time. And this was your medication to make your blood a bit more sticky. So if you hurt yourself, you can it looks after you. We did have several books that we got from hospitals, which were sort of at a very young age level, explaining things and like pictures and stuff. We also had, because he had a portacaf for his treatment, I got him it's kind of like a Build-A-Bear teddy, which has a portacaf himself. So we often use that to explain things to him. I think it was very much a process of like really just like little bits every now and again, you know, age appropriate. And then when he would ask questions, we would sort of answer and be really truthful, but kind of age appropriate wise. But a lot of the questions started coming from sort of, year 1, 2, 3. That was like really significant years for us in dealing with a lot of stuff for him and lots of questions and lots of emotional stuff.
What sort of questions did he have?
Why me? Why? What have I done to deserve this? It was mainly kind of around the anger of being different. Like, why am I so different? How did it happen? You know, things like that. which is really difficult to explain to someone that young. It helped that I had it as well. So I'd be like, we were in our own little club. It's just you and me. We've got the same gene. Isn't that amazing? And we used to just talk about, it's no one's fault. It was just something completely random. And then I used to go on quite a lot of school trips with them anyway. So I would sort of explain, you've got this condition, but if you look at all the other kids in your class, you've all got these like medical bags that they take with them. I was like, there's asthma, there's diabetes, there's so many children in your class that have lots of things. So you just, I think, do the best you can at the time.
Yeah. Mark, does that sound familiar to you?
I've got two boys. I have Jacob, who is 14, and Theo, who is 13. Theo is the one with the bleeding disorder, so he has severe haemophilia A. Or I would say he was diagnosed at 18 months old, so actually a little bit later than Hannah was saying. That actually came about because he had a bit of a nasty fall and like bumped his head quite a lot, or quite badly. He kind of came up with a bruise on his head, which at first just seemed like, he'd fallen over, and as kids do. But then it kind of grew into a bit more of an egg. Again, we kind of monitored it, and then he was tired, he went down for a nap, and then he woke up. He basically looks like an American football player. So I had these big black sort of dark lines, and then the longer kind of over time, you could see the bruises sort of like just dissipating further and further down his face. It was almost like spreading. So we took them to A&E. They were like, yeah, that doesn't look right either. Similar to the point that Hannah was making, that another person came in, started asking questions, but more about, well, how did this happen? Talk us through more. And I could then realise it was probably from a social services angle. I think we had to stay in 3 nights. And it was only after the third night when my wife took over and another nurse came in and asked her, and they said about, well, is there any history of bleeding disorders in your family? And she was like, well, no, I don't think so. But there may have been haemophilia on my grandfather's death certificate. I think he died on the operating table way back when, or when my wife's mum was relatively young. So she'd never known him to have haemophilia, and it was never truly diagnosed. It was a kind of a question mark. And so obviously that then triggered them to do a number of tests. And then again, sort of lo and behold, that kind of came to life.
It must have been quite a shock there, and there must have been a bit of a learning curve for you as parents to sort of get on top of, what is this? What happened?
Yeah, I'd probably correct you on one word that you said, which was a bit of a learning curve. It was an enormous learning curve. It was like a cliff edge learning curve. You kind of just start wanting to understand. You want to understand the reasons why, or where has it come from. You start sort of wanting to understand a lot more of the mechanics behind it, and sort of how the gene piece works. So it was weird that as much as, unfortunately, I'd never want anyone to have something like this, but it's actually quite an interesting subject. And so to a certain extent, I think that helped us when we were talking with Theo, but when he got to the right age, because actually he's quite an inquisitive sort of child. So it almost gave him a topic or a subject to really start understanding, and not to say that made sense to him or that it made it any easier, but I think for him as a child to be able to at least understand it and understand his body a little more was a useful kind of way of us helping him to kind of maybe come to terms with it, or at least understand it a little bit better.
How old was Theo when he started sort of asking questions, or you started to explain to him?
Mm-hmm. Similar to Hannah's story there, I would probably say about 4 or 5. Certainly the questions started off in terms of, why do I have to have this? It was his treatment that he needed it. He needed injections every other day. So why does it happen all the time? Particularly, why does my brother not have it? Because when we first sort of started saying, well, it's something that's more prevalent it's usually boys would have this. He'd very much like, well, why does Jacob not have it? What's what's different, why do I have it, and then when you kind of talk him through that, it's almost a little bit of luck in terms of which which of the mutated gene, or whether you get the mutated gene or not. Again, he couldn't really then understand, or like, well, why have I got it then and my brother hasn't? And then I think over the course of probably so when he was about 7 or 8, he's even more aware of it. But also he was growing and getting stronger, and so we found he was like much more resistant to having his treatment. He just would scream at us like, why have I got to have it? I mean, now, touch wood, thankfully he's a lot older, much more self-aware. I think he's just much more acceptant that actually the less he struggles, the better. He's moved on to a different treatment, so it means he only has to have that every 2 weeks, which has been a massive change for us and him. But again, I wouldn't say he asks questions now. Still, I think he's just more acceptant of how it goes, but I think he still wants to understand more about, will he always have it? What does gene therapy mean? Will that mean that will go away? All of which you want to say, well, yes, we know it will, but we hope it will in his lifetime, but we're obviously not in that position to kind of give him those guarantees.
Both Hannah and Mark were unaware of the possibility of their children having haemophilia when they were born. Jackie knew that she carried the haemophilia gene, and I wondered how this influenced her approach to talking about it with her son.
So my mum is a carrier. My
Okay.
mum, my grandmother. So I've got uncles that have had it. Then my mum's brothers, some of them had it. So then my mum carried it, obviously. Then I've got a brother that has it, and then one that doesn't. So I was expecting it. So when I first had Oliver, you're bringing home this newborn, and they're so tiny and fragile anyway. You just, how am I going to look after him without without him having to bleed, holding him and all of that kind of stuff. And he was only about 7 days old, and every newborn has the heel prick test. So the nurse came in, had to make it clear he had, had haemophilia, so the way they handled him, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so this lady, she couldn't get blood out of him. And she kept clicking away. And I'm thinking, is that normal? But anyway, she did. She finally got blood out of his heel. And it was like water. It wouldn't stop bleeding. So I'm sat there with my newborn in my home. The nurse has left, and I'm holding it. And I'm holding it now for 2.5 hours, and it won't stop bleeding. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. So that's when my journey started, 7 days in, with this little baby that has a heel that wouldn't stop bleeding. And it was quite frightening, because then they were talking about, oh, is he on treatment? Have you thought about, I'm thinking, I've just given birth to him. I haven't thought about that. We managed to stop the bleed, just with compression. Yeah, and then the journey started there, really. So at least we were under a centre, so he was looked after. And the same thing, you try and not wrap him in cotton wool, but you're watching. I had mats down on the floor. I was cushioning as much stuff as I could. And then when he started crawling, he was getting bruises. They were like eggs. It wasn't a bruise. It was like an egg coming out of his forehead. And then he'd go back and he'd get a bruise on a bruise. And then it was understanding that actually when the bruises were coming out, it looks worse than it actually is. It's more if there was a bruise and he hurt himself, and it's more internal that it was an issue. So I was trying to figure all these things out. And so he was a year old, and they booked him in to put in a portacath so he could start treatment.
Jackie recognised how much haemophilia treatment had changed in the decades since her brothers were diagnosed. But she thinks knowledge of haemophilia within the family helped when it came to Oliver accepting his condition.
Normalise is not the word, but I had experience of it, and so does my mum. And she's in their life an awful lot. So we could talk to him about it and say, oh, Uncle Martin had that, or Uncle Jerry had that. So to him, even just within our immediate family, there was connections there. So it wasn't that he was the only one. So I didn't get the questioning, why me? Why did it happen to me? To be fair, I got less of the angry questions. It was just a case of, it was questions, how will this affect me? What do I have to do? Do I have this forever? So there was a little bit of acceptance, I think, because I think that's what we portrayed as well from my own experience. I think he obviously picks up that I'm more cautious. And especially when they're small and they're going to birthday parties and the boy in the class has booked Go Ape. Great. Okay, so we're going to Go Ape, but again, it's all age appropriate. But I've never said that he can't do something. He's very self-aware. So if he feels he's not safe in a situation, then he won't put himself in that, which has helped. It's helped us a lot, actually. When trying to explain what haemophilia is, I just kept it quite simple, just explaining the blood is made up of 12 different factors, number 1 to 12. They all have a different job, and you just don't have number 8. It's the genetic disorder that you're missing number 8. So we have to give you treatment to replace number 8 and explaining about the bleeding and the clotting, and just keep it really simple for him. And that's what we're doing. We're simply replacing it. And as long as we replace it, there's no reason he can't do anything different to any other child.
You said just before that he's quite self-aware. Do you think that self-awareness has come from how you've explained things to him? Do you think he's taken all those things that you've explained to him and that's made him self-aware?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure if it's just the type of character he is or it's a combination of both. Yeah. Because you try not to be smothered, you try not to, you just let them get on. But the back of your mind, especially when they're small, you've always got that extra worry.
Yeah.
So maybe a child does pick up on that.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Hannah and Mark, as your children have grown and maybe wanted to do the birthday parties, go on the bouncy castles, get involved in a sport? How has that been? How have you handled that with them?
When he was younger, it was quite easy because he was quite a shy child anyway. So when there was like a birthday party of a bouncy castle and like 30 crazy kids, he wouldn't have been the one that was like first to jump on it. So it was quite easy. Recently, at the end of junior school, hockey, they started playing hockey. Yeah, but wooden hockey sticks. So I was like, oh. So I phoned up his centre and the physio said, oh no, like, not without safety gear. He needs like shin pads and stuff. I tried to say to Jake, it's not very safe. You shouldn't really be doing it. You might have to do something different, like referee when they're doing the games. And he was really the first time he was really certain. He was like, no, I'm either going to do all of it or I'm not going to do anything. So we had a conversation with a physio again. And she was like, you know what? This is the first time he's kind of really spoken out about it. So let's listen to him. So we kind of sat him down and we're like, that's fine. You can do it. But if you get injured, then let's review it after that. So that was great, actually, to involve the centre and for him to hear it from a professional as well as me and sort of saying, Jake, this isn't ideal. We wouldn't really recommend you do this. But if if you really want to just go for it and do it, then let's just go for it and see what happens. And then, she just said to me, he might hurt himself. He might get a bleed, but then there's going to be a time in his life where it's going to be a learning curve and he's got to, he will learn from it. But I guess now he's just started secondary school. So there are 2 things that he's not going to be able to do. He'll be able to do the skills bit, but he won't be able to take part in the actual contact sport. So it's rugby and hockey. So yeah, that's kind of coming up in the future. So we haven't crossed that bridge yet.
That is the exact bridge that we have crossed. So both my boys they're now both in high school, and it is a massive rugby school. They basically live and breathe rugby there. That's pretty much the only sport that they do during the winter months. Obviously, my eldest started going there first. He got really into it. He's actually quite good, so he's like the A team as well. Then when Theo joined, again we had a discussion with the centre. They never said no, you shouldn't do it, but similarly to Hannah, it was very much around. There were some very strict parameters that would have to be done. Again, very much like do passing, kicking. You can do touch rugby, but even then, I could tell that they were hesitant to almost recommend that. The difference, I think, to Theo is he is very forthright and very opinionated, and he was very much like, I'm going to do this. We made a point of making the decisions with him and talking him through it, and again, helping him to understand we're not doing this because to spite you, it's obviously to help you. The school were very good. They similarly sort of trained him to be a referee, and he was kind of refereeing for some of the games, which he kind of enjoyed. But I think the problem or the challenge we had was that because my other son was sort of moving up the ranks and I ended up in the top team, you kind of get people also saying, "Oh, you're Jacob's brother. He's really good at rugby. What are you?" And I think that was probably the first time that we recognised that, or Theo recognised that he was almost being held back from doing something that he, to be honest, he'd probably be really good at it as well because of his like headstrong nature. So I think that was probably the first time that he acknowledged that his haemophilia was actually holding him back from doing something. To be fair, that's probably the only thing that we've really said you can't do. And similarly to Hannah, we'd say, well, we'll see how other activities go. I mean, he's doing like a rock climbing course at the moment now, which you'd initially go, again, not the ideal, but I kind of feel we've had to make a compromise there and go, well, you're definitely not going to do rugby, therefore you can do rock climbing. Just obviously you've got to be more careful about it, and it's a bit of a risk-based approach of, well, I'm not going to wrap him in cotton wool. We're very much like that sort of thing. If we don't want to hold him back where we don't have to, and that probably means that we are a little bit less on the cautionary side to try and give him some optionality and give him a bit of freedom as well.
For the parents, ensuring children have the freedom to live full lives protected by their treatment and a level of risk assessment is a difficult balancing act. But to really make this work, it's important that the children understand how their treatment works too. But even when they do understand, the nature of how they're treated can be difficult for them to cope with.
Look, I definitely say Theo understands that. As I say, he's a very quizzical kind of interested child anyway, so he wants to understand about it all. He actually, I think partly because of the way his treatment kind of evolved when he was younger, he had a needle phobia, which basically means even now, it's very strange. He will only let me do his treatment. Not that my wife's ever done it incorrectly, but I think there was a time where, like, it's not the most comfortable thing happening, and I think there was a particular like light bulb moment where I must have put the needle in exactly the perfect angle so it didn't sting. And so he was like, "Daddy, you're the only one who's going to do this now." He can barely even look at a needle. We had the conversations when his portacath got blocked, or and it was a point where it's like, well, do we put a new one in, or actually we just take it out and you've got to do it that way? And there was talk about him, do you want to start helping, even just make your medicine up and introducing him that way? Wouldn't have it till. He just won't look at a needle. And so I don't know if because it's only once every 2 weeks now, it's not particularly often, we've not necessarily had to. I've asked him a couple of times, like, would you want to do that? And he's still like, no, doesn't want to do it. So I think even now it's just the concept of putting a needle in yourself.
Intravenous treatment can be particularly unnerving for anyone experiencing needle phobia. There are now haemophilia treatments that can be given subcutaneously rather than into the vein, which can make a difference here. But as Jackie explains, the child's perspective isn't always what you might expect.
Oliver's been quite good, I would say. We had it rocky when he was about 3 years old, having to hold him down to give him his treatment through his portacath. So we started doing our own play therapy. So we'd get all his monkeys, and like Hannah mentioned, there's a particular charity that gives you like a Build-A-Bear toy, and it had a porta cath. So we would spend like an hour and a half injecting all the monkeys, getting the treatment ready, drawing it up, all of that. And that did help. And so we did come out the other side of that. And so when he was entitled to go on the Hemlibra, the nurses kept saying, you should try this, you should try this. But because things were going so well, it was almost like I didn't want to rock the boat. And I felt that Oliver needed to make the decision for himself because we'd speak to him and the nurse would speak to him and say, this is amazing. You could just have an injection every 2 weeks. And he didn't want to do that. He would rather have, we went from 3 days down to 2. And he was really against it. So I backed off and I left it. And I thought, so by this point, he was probably about 6. And then I came to him again and we were asking and having the open conversation. We did start talking about starting on the new treatment. I'll never forget, you forget from a child's point of view, it wasn't about the needle. One day the nurse was talking to him and I said, why don't you want to change the treatment? He said, Mummy, I won't get my Smarties every second day. That's what the child was worried about. His packet of Smarties in a plastic bowl that he would eat whilst I was doing his injection, because then he'd get a pack every 2 weeks. So from his point of view, it made my heart break. I just thought, there's us talking about treatment and needles, and for him it was those Smarties. And that really brought it back to real basic, understanding. Sometimes we overthink, and as adults, yeah. But from a child's perspective, it was simply he didn't want to, he wanted the Smarties. And I just felt like I'll give you Smarties every day if it makes your life easier and my life easier. And so that's what we did. And then he got old enough that he wanted Robux. So that was a game changer because I held back from all of that. So if you've got a carrot, it does help. It did work. It did work. Yeah, he's eased into it and now he just accepts it. He does make sure that I'm using the smaller needle, not the large needle that you draw up the medication. So we sort of joke about that and make sure I'm using the right needle. But I think he's just turned 10. But I would say within the next year, he would probably maybe look at doing it for himself. But I won't push anything. He's still his last year in primary school.
Smarties were the proverbial carrot that gave Jackie's son the confidence to accept having treatment. But what about having the confidence as a child to talk about your disorder to other people? Here's Hannah again.
Jake kept his bleeding disorder like a real secret at school and with friends, and he had a scar, which he kind of, he was kind of really shy about the whole thing. And when we kind of unpacked it all, it wasn't actually that he didn't want people to know, it was that he didn't feel confident enough to explain it or to answer their questions. So before he'd just like ignore them or go like, none of your business, or, lie about his medical alert watch and say, it's just a watch or it's like a mirror or something. Yeah, he just didn't feel confident enough. So I think one of the best things we got, sort of giving Jake like almost like a script, like he wanted like a confident answer to be able to go, I've got a bleeding disorder, my blood's, just doesn't clot, so I just have to take medicine and then I'm fine. It's just if I hurt myself, I just need some more support. So yeah, just that was like a real learning curve for us because we just thought, he's just really secret, he just doesn't want anyone to know. But it was just, bless him, he was only like 9 or 10 at the time. Of course he's not going to feel confident if he doesn't fully understand it. So I just found that such a help, really. It's just giving them the confidence to be able to explain it in their language to their friends, really.
From a child's perspective, sometimes we have to just simplify it and think, yes, how would I answer that? Or, why do I not want to do that? I want Smarties. I'd never thought he'd come out with that. So sometimes it is. It's just peeling it back and and just talking like this. So I've just picked that up from Hannah, and that's what's lovely about the charities, because we're the parents raising these children as best as the hospitals look after them and their treatment plans. It's the everyday stuff that's really important to us and our children, really.
In terms of other sources of support then, aside from your centre, are charities like local families a good source of support in terms of, have they supported you in talking to your children? Have you picked up ideas from other parents, or do you have conversations with other parents about the best way to talk to your children about particular aspects of their haemophilia or their treatment?
Yeah, the charities I feel have been amazing. It's just connecting us all together. That's how I've met Mark and Hannah, and their boys are that little bit older than Oliver, only by a year or 2 years. So if I see them at a charity event, I can ask them questions about going into secondary school, because this is all new to me. I haven't got a clue, but they've been there. And similar, if I'm at an event that they've organised, you've got young parents that are, they're at the beginning of their journey. And so just to talk to them and just share information. And also it's brilliant for the children because we all go along, we bring siblings, which is really important because it affects them too. And it's just bringing all the children together of different age groups and realizing actually I'm not the only one that has haemophilia. There are other children and there's other similar bleeding disorders. So I think that's a lifeline, I think, for lots of families. Even though you've got close family members or friends, they just don't understand it like another parent with a child with a bleeding disorder.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. Just speaking to other parents, it's just somebody that knows what you're going through and, has any other ideas or anything that's worked, or it's just having that support there. And then it gives you the support to then support your child the best you can. Because, the nurses are amazing and the doctors are amazing, but they often don't have that lived experience, they're often not a parent themselves. So it's connecting with people that really kind of get it is essential, I think.
Yeah, I'd absolutely echo the same. I think, as Jackie was saying, it almost helps to normalise this for the children. They're around other kids, look and smell the same, and you go, actually, yeah, you're not different. You just happen to have a collective thing between you. I'd absolutely echo what Anna was saying as well. I almost find that's a bit more like therapy for the adults, because, and rightly so, when your children are growing up, all the healthcare professionals are very much around it's around the child and how you kind of help them. But what I've actually found is that being in with the local families and doing the events there, giving that reassurance to younger parents who are much more through the cycle, it actually made me feel good about the whole thing. Like, I've learned a lot through this, and yes, it's tough, but if you can help someone that little bit more, where you kind of talk through and go, well, actually, we've done this, I think it does enable you to get that little bit of group therapy just as an adult, and going, actually, it's quite refreshing to kind of know that you've got that support as well. So yeah, I can't thank them enough.
What a positive note to end on. It's clear from Hannah, Mark and Jackie that it's not just talking to children about their bleeding disorder that's important, it's listening to them too. Mutual support and sharing experience with other parents has been a big help to all of them. Thank you to Hannah, Mark and Jackie for taking part in this episode of Haemcast, and thanks also to local families with bleeding disorders. If your family is affected by a bleeding disorder and you'd like to connect with the local families group, you can find details of their website in the information for this episode. Thank you for listening and join us again soon.